Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at @It'sJessino. So yes, things look a little bit different around here. I spent some time on the branding over the last couple of days, so I hope you guys are enjoying that a little bit. Let me know in the chat box what you think. But most importantly, on today's show, we're going to be talking about transfers. Yay! Talking about transfers as usual. So on today's show, what we want to do is kind of profile Rodrigo de Paul. We've been linked with him, and I find him kind of interesting because he's not a player that I would normally look at. I actually don't watch a lot of Serie A, so it's been interesting kind of looking to see what kind of player he is, and to see kind of like what he does, what he's good at, and things like that. So we'll be profiling him today and kind of asking and trying to answer the question of, is he the answer? Is he the answer to our creativity issues? A lot of Arsenal fans feel as though we lack creativity and goal scoring, and we need goals from midfield. So we'll talk about whether or not this guy can do that for us. And then also we'll go on and talk about Tyler Adams, Joaquin Correa, and a bunch of other people, Ben White. We'll talk about all those guys. So that's what we'll be doing today. So let me know in the chat box how you're feeling. Did you watch the Spain match? Boring draw? Was it not? Did you guys see Alexander Isak? Thought he played pretty well. So I'm sure the price will go up on him. And on today's show, Harry will be here a little bit later, but I have George here now. So we'll just add George in. Hey, George, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So how have you been enjoying the Euros so far and all the football that we've been bombarded with for the last couple of days?
I like it. You know, what's kind of weird is I'm noticing fans are really happy about the Euros, but it seemed like the season is a mile away from when it just really ended. And so we're just getting this bombardment of football. And I don't know, personally, I love it. I think there's a lot of really great smaller teams, or quotations of smaller teams, that are performing well. And I think the games are tight, which is always really great for, analysis geeks like myself. So yeah, no, I'm loving it. And I think there's been so much world events that's happened, kind of both transfers and of course what happened over the weekend. And that's just enough to kind of make yourself look back on a lot of these things. So hopefully we can untangle this web, because I do think it's a web, and you've got to make sure that you've got your trusty flashlight here to see everything.
Exactly. I think it's just so interesting. I can literally watch a game and feel the moment in which Arsenal fans are like, oh, look at this player. He's playing so well. Can we link him, Google him? Never heard of him before, never seen him play for his club team. But yes, he is the answer to all of our problems. We saw that a little bit with Embolo. Definitely saw that with Calvin Phillips. It's been really interesting and just fun. I like to take Arsenal Twitter very unserious.
You can't take it seriously.
It's trying not to take it super serious. So it is funny seeing how quickly we start wanting that player on our team because he played well in the Euros. What do you think about that? Recruiting players off of a a national tournament or something like that?
Yeah, so it's really, really tough. So, I think there's two examples like on different side of the spectrum here with Locatelli and Denzel Dumfries that I use really to like kind of epitomize this Arsenal Twitter perception. And so for myself, I always make sure do your due diligence. I don't think you can ever base it off one game of watching, but like what I think it does allow you to do is maybe see, okay, these are the qualities I want to see consistently in my players specifically, but if you looked at like Locatelli, the kind of general consensus before the game was, oh my God, he's amazing. He's a ball progression machine. He's immense. And then you go off after Twitter, and he's now worse than Granit Xhaka, and horrific. And then Denzel Dumfries is the opposite, where before, oh, he's just in the Dutch league, he's really horrible. And then we see him put in a performance, and he's the exact type of right back that we need here, and he's going to solve all our problems. So yeah, there's a little bit of revisionism, but you know what? We're fans. We're allowed that, right? We're not supposed to be the objective robots that we try to be. So,
look, if you guys have been on the channel since the beginning, you guys know I rate Denzel Dumfries. I always have, always thought he was the right type of right back that we should look at. And because he's 24 years old, I thought that he still has enough time to adapt to the Premier League. Then all of a sudden, all these people are like, why haven't we been looking at Dumfries? I'm like, I've been telling you guys. And I know, it just depends on what you like to see in a player. Yeah. But nevertheless, it's been really, really interesting the last couple of days. Also been watching a lot. Well, not a lot, but the Copa, which is really interesting. That's really more of like my wheelhouse. It's where I like to be. I love my little Copa. I love my Brazil, So it's a lot going on right now. So I've really been enjoying myself. But let's go ahead and get started with the show. Let's see. Well, Jim was also supposed to be here, you guys. I was supposed to let you guys know that as well. But Jim had some personal things that he had to deal with, but he was so gracious to at least let us know about Rodrigo de Paul. He's been a huge advocate of the player. He knows more about him than I do. So he was able to record a video for us. So we will discuss what he says about the player. Me and George will do that as the video plays. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up now. That's what it looks like, and hopefully I already see it's muted. Let me fix that. I can already see that. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and play the video now. I hope you guys can hear this.
I think it's still muted, Jess. I don't know if they can hear it. I don't know if I can hear it.
Hold on.
Hold on. 1 second,
Give me 1
guys.
second, you guys. Let's see. Why can't you guys hear that?
Well, in the meantime, you guys should all definitely like, comment, subscribe. This is going to be a good one here.
Do that while I figure this out, you guys, because I want you guys to hear the video. Why didn't you guys say that you can hear it?
Rodrigo de Paul.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Can you hear it now?
He is an Argentinian international.
If you can hear him, say yes.
Well respected in the Argentinian game. He's growing
more
and more pivotal.
I can hear
Argentina. Messi only this week was saying how much he respected him and he's enjoying playing with him and getting more used to his type of play. The story for him was he was a bit of a late bloomer. He started off at Racing Club in Argentina. He took a while to come good, but eventually he really did impress, and he got his move eventually to Europe, Valencia. I'm a bit of a fan of Valencia in Spain, and I don't know, it was really strange because he seemed to be lost in the shuffle of the pack. I never really noticed him when he was there. He didn't get many games, and when he did get anything, he didn't really make his mark. So eventually he ends up going back on loan to Argentina for Racing Club. He helps them have some success, I think, in the South America, Copa de Libertadores. And anyway, he gets a permanent move back there, but then he ends up going back to Italy in Udinese, where slowly but surely now he's established himself as one of the best players in Italy. According to WhoScored.com, last season he was rated the 5th best player in Serie A with a 7.41 rating, and here's one for you, Bruno Fernandes got a 7.47, so it shows you how good a season he's had. A couple more stats for you. He was the 5th best in Europe's top 5 leagues for dribbles. Jack Grealish averages 2.5 dribbles per game, and De Paul is on 3.4 per game. So it just shows you the kind of player we are talking about here.
Okay, so let's pause there just for a second. So what do you think about that so far, George? Like the comparison to Bruno Fernandes and the type of season that he's had, and then the dribbling stat, being pretty close to Jack Grealish.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things in there. I think I would actually agree with the Bruno comparison very much in the sense that he's very output driven. And so when you look at the dribbling kind of statistic, I think you always have to take into account what kind of league we're looking at, what kind of player that we're really comparing to. And so it's really difficult to maybe do direct kind of comparisons between, say, a Grealish in the Premier League and say what Udinese or Rodrigo de Paul would do kind of in Serie A. Now, it's clear both sets of players kind of run their offenses. But what I do see kind of with de Paul is he's very much a high-risk passer. And so while he certainly can dribble, he likes to burst into space, and then he'll attempt through balls quite brilliantly, to be honest with you. And so he is definitely a dribbly version. I do kind of worry on the success rate, maybe, of comparing it to a Grealish. And that just comes down to, I think, the physicality of the league. And so what you would maybe question in any Serie A import is kind of very similar. The one thing that maybe you don't have that concern with kind of De Paul is that he's a very strong passer, not only over 5 yards, but over 15. If you analyze some of these dribbles, he very commonly takes it from, areas in his own half and is able to really progress that into the other opposition's part of the pitch. And I think when you have that capability, that translates anywhere. That's not just a series league, and that's not just beating a counter press. So yeah, I think the Bruno comparison is probably best in terms of saying that we're going to get an output machine in a sense. And so when you're looking at these creativity numbers, you're going to have somebody who does like to hug that half space, but maybe isn't as great defensively. And I think that's probably a really good point to make, where Bruno Fernandes is excellent at what he does, but if you're asking him to come back and do other things, I don't think that you're going to get the best Bruno Fernandes. And that's the same thing with Rodrigo de Paul. So if you're asking him to be a true 8 or you want him to cover back, that's not something he's great at. But get him on the ball and tell him just to wreak havoc, then awesome. He's great. But he's definitely not an ESR in terms of work rate backwards.
Perfect. Hey, Harry. Everybody say hi to Harry. He's here. How are you feeling?
I'm late, boss. Sorry, I'm a late gaffer. Sorry, I'm late.
I'm just gonna dock your pay. No worries. I'm just
You're
gonna
getting
dock your
fined.
pay. Yeah, you're getting fined. So let's finish up Jim's video and see what else he has to say about Rodrigo de Paul.
He was also the 4th best or most dribble, most foul player per game, with Jack Grealish obviously first. He's also 18th in Europe's top 5 leagues for key passes, which really shows you the kind of player we're talking about here. He got 9 goals and 9 assists, and an interesting one I found anyway. He was 7th for crosses with 2 crosses per game, and Trent Alexander-Arnold, the cross machine, averages 1.9, so he's actually doing more crosses than Trent Alexander-Arnold, England's best right back. Anyway, What would he bring to Arsenal, I hear you say? He would be able to play on the wings, be the left or the right, wherever he's asked to play. Up front as well, he's played there. I think it was not last season, but the season before he ended up playing there. But probably he'd end up playing as a number 10, orchestrating attacks and maybe getting the odd talismanic winner or assist. He could also play as a number 8 if Arteta wants to replace Ceballos with him. So it really just shows you what he could bring. But I think an interesting thing is as well is that he's the captain for Udinese, and I think there was an article in The Athletic recently by James Horncastle where he said that more and more he is becoming a real leader for the club.
So Jim kind of already talked about what you were saying about his passing and the dribbling and that aspect of it. But now he's kind of touching on the leadership part of Rodrigo de Paul's profile and how he's the captain of Udinese. And I think there's kind of like a growing theme with some of our players is that they're either leaders in their team or captains in their team in some way, shape, or form. Is that a good thing that we should be looking at, is to try to bring in leaders from other teams? What do you guys think about that? Go to Harry first.
Yeah, I think it is. I think we speak about it quite a lot in terms of that we're lacking that sometimes, especially with our younger players, and that's not a criticism of them. It just comes with age and experience. So I think he's at a good age. Obviously, there's lots of different types of captains, aren't there? You know, so for example, if someone was to sign Aubameyang, you know, we wouldn't describe him as a leader, but he is a captain. So it'd be good to know what his personality is actually like, and if he's a captain because he's their better player, or if he's a captain because he's a great player, but he's also got those personality traits, leadership qualities, which is something that I think we're missing, especially in those smaller games, the games where we can't seem to get ourselves up for the challenge. I think we need those leadership qualities, both from a personality level and both from an ability level. So I think it's a good potential signing. I think it kind of shows where we are as well as a club, that we have to look at these sort of players who perhaps, you know, aren't going to be wanted by the very best clubs. And, you know, as much as we hope and we wish we can put out the bag for players like Grealish and whatnot, it just shows that perhaps these are slightly more realistic signings.
I see you guys are asking about goals also. He does score goals and he gets assists as well. What I'm looking at right here is 9 goals and 11 assists for Udinese this season. So, and that's, most of them came in the Serie A. So it's not like he just did that in the Coppa Italia or anything like that. So he does score goals and get assists, if you guys are worried about that. I know that's a big thing with Arsenal fans right now. So we'll just listen to the last part of his video now.
And I think that is something to look at as well. Arsenal are needing leaders. He would be that player. He would be the player that would grab the game by the scruff of the neck. Interest is quite interesting. He's been heavily linked with Atletico Madrid. They seem to think 20 million plus a player is going to get him. Udinese don't. They want 40 million euros, which is a bargain. Milan and Juventus are also looking as well. Milan's interest depends on what happens with Hakan Çalhanoğlu, but we'll see what happens there. But if Arsenal did sign him, he could be really, really good. And I think many people would see him as the bargain of the summer by the end of the season.
Perfect. So that was Jim. If you guys don't follow Jim, you should. He has his own channel and stuff coming out soon. But if you want to go ahead and follow Jim, you can at BigJimmy_V and at HailEndArsenal. So yeah, that was very nice of him to put that together for us because he couldn't be on the show today. But what do you guys think about what he said about Rodrigo de Paul being the bargain of the summer. You know, all things considered, the amount of goals that he scores, the type of profile, the fact that they want at least 40 million for him, and he's 27 years old. George, is that a bargain to you? You know, what do you think?
So it's a tough one. He's definitely a good player. And I just think when you're looking at 40 million euros, you know, that's 38 million pounds. Are you willing to go to the top end of a Buendia type signing for somebody like De Paul? I see him as better than Buendia, but ultimately I don't think that our system or our lack of creativity really exists in that right-hand half space. So for me, it's kind of a weird difference of where our creativity may be needed. And so I'm not necessarily looking at him as maybe the bargain of the summer, because personally, I think everybody knows on Twitter my favorite is Houssam Aouar, who I do think is much cheaper, who at the high end has been quoted at 30 million pounds. And so, and that's from L'Equipe. So when I'm looking at things that I do like to see, I see goals and assists, I see more transition threat, and I see him addressing more urgently the needs of a left-hand kind of creative half space player that we do lack. And so from a deal of the summer perspective, I do prefer Aouar, but Rodrigo de Paul is an excellent player. I really like him. He seems to be in that mold of a right half space kind of creator that we do seem to be looking at, right? I just don't know if I would pay that much for somebody that I would consider to be squad depth. I would prefer someone like an Emile Smith-Rowe there. And that's only really because I don't think Rodrigo de Paul has the defensive security that a lot of people may look at if you do watch him quite regularly. And so that is a big part of his game where you would need it kind of in the Premier League, particularly if we're going to engage in a counter-pressing system, right? That was very evident from Arteta's last 5 games that that's going to be a very big part of what he wants to see in the future. So for me, it's a great player, but fundamentally, I wouldn't push the boat out if he's going to be the only creative signing that we make. If we do have available stuff for him, then great. Yeah, let's go for somebody like Rodrigo de Paul. But I don't see him quite necessarily as the bargain of the summer. I do think that's Houssam Aouar, who's done it in the Champions League and back-to-back campaigns. From a pedigree perspective, I see more with Houssam Aouar. But again, Rodrigo de Paul, he's done great, you know, so it's not like you're getting a bad player in terms of getting him. I just don't think it kind of addresses our most urgent needs in the system. That's really where I lie with it.
Yeah, and he plays on the right-hand side, which I'm still trying to figure it out. So for me, when I kind of was going through my notes on him, I'm thinking 4-3-3, the right-sided center midfielder. Like that's what it is, and that's probably what we were looking at Buendia for as well, which it just says 4-3-3 to me. And it didn't say that until then, because Odegaard to me just doesn't fit that position, but Rodrigo de Paul does, because he also does crosses and things like that. So he probably does overlapping and all kinds of stuff. So I think he's a good player. I just, from a profiles perspective, not just playing style, but age and price, I'm like, you know, it's just a little bit like 27. Like, I know that's not old and not everybody in our team can be young, but you know where I stand, 23 to 25 years old. Like, that is the sweet spot. You know, Harry, am I wrong about that? Do you think that we need older players or players with a little bit more? I mean, experience is such a weird word because you can be younger and have more experience, but what about the age profile of this player? Like, do you like it? Is it weird? Like, what do you think?
No, it's just funny when someone says 27 is old, because then that makes me feel super, super, super old. So I like to think all footballers are super young. Even someone who's like 33, I'm like, yeah, he's really young. He's got years in the bag. He's got years. I know what you're saying. I feel like, for me, I think like 26 to 28 is still a good age. But I appreciate that, you know, a player at 23 could have, you know, almost 200-300 games under his belt, sometimes more than a 24, 25-year-old who's had this kind of a staggered progression. I just think it's more about the personality, to be honest, regardless of the age. I think sometimes if you sign a 29, 30-year-old who's got plenty in the tank, he's got lots of experience, I think it's okay, you know, like a David Luiz. But in the same respect, I agree that we should be looking for signings of that certain age bracket, of a younger age bracket. But I do think I do think at times I feel like we're too young or too inexperienced, and someone, you know, of who's had quite an interesting career in terms of his development. I think that could prove really helpful for us. So it's a tough one about age, isn't it? I mean, listen, at the end of the day, we just need, firstly, we need to sign some players. Like, you know, we need to get some guys in the, you know, in the squad. So at the moment, I'll take any age, and I think it's more of a system thing, isn't it, that you've hinted at the moment. It feels like we're at a crossroads between a 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1, and that key signing will kind of dictate, you know, which way we go forward. And the more I think about it, the more I think that Arteta wants to go for a 4-3-3, and which is why I think you might even see someone like Emil Smith-Rowe play as a number 10, because even though he's a creative player, he's got a bit more industrialness about him. He's a little bit more, you know, spontaneous in his play, so you could see him picking up the ball. I think the problem lies that the players that we have had at the team previously haven't been good enough to play a 4-3-3. We just haven't had three good central midfielders. We've had Xhaka and Partey, we've had El Neni in and out, we've had Ceballos in and out. If you had an Aaron Ramsey in there, someone like an Odegaard probably wouldn't have even been signed, because you've got a good balance. You know, you've got a good midfield three. So I think a lot of that rests on just him finding the right player, and I think the age might become secondary.
You heard that, Arteta and Edu? Harry wants you to sign some players. Just sign some players.
Come on.
Sign somebody. Do something.
3 weeks ago, I was like, the guys are going to do the business. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. We'll get things wrapped up. And now I'm just like...
It's been 5 minutes. It's literally been 5 minutes.
Has it been a week that it's been opened yet?
It feels longer. It feels longer, all right? It feels longer.
True story. I saw somebody on Twitter. It was like the window wasn't even open yet. Like it opened the next day, and they were like, "The way this window is gone already, it's a shambles." And I was like, "It's literally not open. Like, are you going crazy?"
I need some traction. I need some new players. I need the picture of the shirt. I need some new reveals. I need some fancy videos. I'm missing the content.
I'm dying. You guys are going to make it through. You're not going to make it through.
As being like, you know, definitely not ageist. I hope that doesn't come across, because, yeah, on the older end of the spectrum here, I kind of appreciate, you know, older players as well. It is worth mentioning, look, that our average age is 24.6. It's actually the third youngest in the league. And so when you are talking about kind of a mix of profiles here, and that's without Luiz going, right? Without some of these older players that do bring up our mean. So we have a really, really young team. So it doesn't hurt to have experience. I think fundamentally for me, whenever I have this argument kind of on Twitter, is I look at the system. And so really when I do find a right-hand sided kind of creator, I don't like it, because I feel we have those creativity on that side of the pitch. I'm not yearning for something like that, where when I look at somebody like a Houssam Aouar on the left, what I love is that I don't feel we have that creative, consistent presence on the left. And so I feel like when we do recruit, we need to recruit people that are versatile, but are addressing a gap. And so for me, Houssam Aouar, he doesn't matter if he's kind of in the pivot. You know, he's played with Ndombele in a pivot and had a masterclass against Manchester City, and has done similar on the left wing and in midfield. So when you're looking at a versatility aspect, he's there and he addresses a need. Whereas if I were to look at De Paul, it would have to be 4-3-3, really. Or kind of a really water carrier 4-2-3-1. But again, I use that as kind of because he doesn't really do any defense, right? So water carrier might be harsh, but you know, really you do have to supply for him in that aspect. And it's not an issue. It's just I don't like being kind of constrained in terms of where I want to go. So I want all of our signings to kind of really open up, you know, with you know, open up possibilities. I don't want to close it, and I'm really kind of tired of that. But yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at that age, it kind of says everything, right? And that's without Luiz. So look, leadership is great. I just want it to fix kind of a hole for a reason. And if you're spending 38 million pounds, I don't think you address an Aouar. I think that's your creative signing of the window. So if you're doing that, let's make sure that he addresses every hole, at least, that you see.
Yeah, I think I'm like, is he the answer? I'm like, I don't know. Like, because I'm still like, the player, when we're linked with him, I was like, what? Are you serious? You know, because when I'm like, just my first thing was like, doesn't he play like just off of the right? Like what's going on? And then I watched him play for Argentina. He was a little bit peripheral. To be honest, everybody's pretty peripheral in that team because they just passed to Messi. So I didn't really get a good gauge of him, but for 40 million, I have to know for sure, and maybe Edu and Arteta know for sure he's the answer. But for me, just looking at it, I agree with you, George. I think the left is actually where we need to fix things up. We have Saka and Pepe on the right, so it's like, what are we doing?
There's a difference there's a difference between buying competition for places and then buying a problem. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to just throw someone in the works. A bit like Willian, who's then going to stunt the development of a Pepe, to get to the end goal, which is eventually to play Pepe. So yeah, I agree with it. But then in the same token, sometimes competition for places is good. Hopefully it raises everyone's level. So we'll just have to wait and see.
We have almost 150 million pounds in that area of the pitch. That's my only. So when I look, forget what I think and say I'm wrong. We fundamentally have 150 million pound assets, and I'm devaluing Pepe right now, massively. Saka's 100 million pound player, right? And when I'm looking at Pepe, we have that much money invested in that area of the pitch. And for me, he has to be 100% what we need, right? If we're going to add money there, great, but it's almost kind of going into the Ben White situation there, and it's it's not smart. And we're starting.
We're gonna get to the Ben White situation. I'm ready.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Maybe the pot is so much bigger than we think. And that perhaps what we're doing now is we're looking at options, squad options. I remember back in the day when we had so many good options off the bench at the Emirates. Yeah. You could bring on Rosicky, you could bring on Haleb. You could bring on Arshavin, or Walcott. There were so many creative options. And at the minute, it just feels like last season our go-to players were Lacazette, maybe ESR off the bench, God forbid Willian or Pepe. So maybe Arteta is just trying to build, some good options. And perhaps he won't be a starter. Perhaps he'll be someone that they say, hey, 30, 40 million. It's a lot of money, but maybe they think his ceiling's quite high, and maybe they think, it will be a good squad player. And then with that in mind, maybe that 40 million signing, he could be one of 4, one of 5. It's just make all their priorities are totally different to ours, or wrong, whichever way you want to look at it. But it just makes you think maybe the pot is huge. We don't know.
Well, let me just say this. I was supposed to say this at the very beginning, that I was in a Twitter Spaces with Chris Wheatley, and he said that we could spend 80 million, 40 and 40 on 2 players. You know what I mean? So 40 million each on 2 players. So, and he's pretty reliable, in terms of, we're not talking about R24 or whatever these people are, and these random people on Twitter, he's actually knows things. So that leads me to believe that there's some sort of investment there, because you can't say you're going to spend that amount of money without selling. So I agree with you, Harry. I think the pot is probably bigger than what we think. And that 40 million or whatever, one of them is going to go to probably the next player that we're going to talk about, which is the replacement for Granit Xhaka, Locatelli type of person. And the other one's going to go to a center back, your Ben White, so that's what we're going to spend the 80 million on, so there you go. But let's move on to the Locatelli situation, whatever it is. Reports coming out today that we're serious about it, we're ready, but at the same time, it could just be to try to get Juventus, who's also interested in him, to make moves, saying that we're ready to spend 40 million on him. But the reality is if we have the money and they don't, and we can offer him something attractive, he could end up coming to us. So I think it's worthwhile to talk about this player, because I watched him just like everybody else did with Italy, and he was the best thing since sliced bread before the whistle went, and then after, he's horrible, he's horrendous, he's the worst. I'm like, that's why we don't need to be just making split decisions on players based on an international tournament. Even just one game with their club, come on. But from what I've seen of him, I think he's a good all-around footballer. He would lift the ceiling in terms of what Xhaka was able to give us, but give us what Xhaka did as well. That good partner for Thomas Partey, but more well-rounded. I want to throw this to George, because you did do some profiling on him earlier, maybe a week or so ago. What are your thoughts on Locatelli, and where do you see him fitting in the Arsenal system?
So I've done a lot of devil's advocate for this because I kind of looked, ahead of the curve, as they say, because I did post about him right before, and then his Italy performance came, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, you can't run." So the thing with Locatelli, he is an absolute ball progression monster. If you're looking at kind of the under 23s in the top 5 leagues in terms of progressions, both carries and passes, Locatelli is only beaten by Boubakary Soumaré, my probably favorite pivot player. And so from a progression standpoint, he is absolutely in that kind of Xhaka profile. So when we're looking at, maybe replicating what we do with Xhaka, but just a little bit better, you see that 100%. Where the possibilities kind of lie is that he's a sitter who has an amazing passing range that will stretch the opposition shape, for sure. He'll help facilitate our build-up, but I'm really worried in defensive transition. I don't think that he has the 5-yard burst that, translates well into the EPL and also going against the counter press. So I think you limit the ceiling of a team if you don't have athletes that can meet in isolation like that. And for me, it doesn't make sense that we would get rid of a player who is very good at that. Like if that was the plan and you're telling me, George, we want to pair Partey with a defensive deep lying playmaker, why get rid of arguably, I know people don't like it, but one of the best in the league at that right now, and replace him with somebody who arguably doesn't do it better right now. And while he's a similar profile, I get it. I don't know why you would sell that if that's the way that we want to go. And also, when you look back, I think I may have quoted this kind of quote with Arteta previously, but back in 2019, we had a quote from him that looked and highlighting how much he valued winning your individual duels and pace and power. Kind of hate to use that trope, but in the midfield, like he literally has a quote in terms of, making sure that City, the reason that they've dominated for so long, it's vital to have intensity and athletic aggression in key 1v1 moments. Who does that sound like? Cough, cough. It sounds like Basuma. And I would not associate that, though, with Locatelli. That's kind of where the distance for me kind of lacks, where he certainly is aggressive. He's great with the ball, and he's going to be a great build-up player. But if you're asking him to meet kind of the fullback in isolation out wide, or you're asking him to kind of track back, if he's left in isolation, he's not going to be able to do that. And we saw that when he was pushed higher up with Italy, right? I mean, I think he was out of position, but what you did see is when the play turned, he was not able to really influence itself kind of running back to goal. And that's the only caveat that I would make with getting Locatelli. Like, let's just make sure that we understand the player. So in that aspect, I would love him as a squad option. Again, it's just he's not my plan A, and it's not what I want there. I think that we definitely need, a defensive, deep-lying playmaker in the squad. It's just I don't want that in midfield. I want to move on from this. I want to go back to our Invincibles roots, and I want to change what we're doing in the engine room. I don't think Locatelli screams that, and I don't think he does that, but he's a great player. So that's the only caveat I would make. But to not sit on the fence, no, I would not do it, because I don't think he solves what I believe that we're missing. Another argument that I've placed, really, just to wrap it up, is Thomas Partey. Where has he had his best games? Ironically, with El Neni. And when you look at the type of sitter that we're talking about right now, let's just say for argument's sake that Locatelli is better than Granit Xhaka, though subjectively I don't agree, but let's use it as an argument. He played better with Mohamed El Neni as that type of sitter, even though that was less quality. And so if you're looking at upgrading that sitter, you just have to look where he played best with. And I believe, your El Neni is your kind of best version in Basuma, right? Those are very different type of sitters, right? And so I believe that's the profile that we go with to unlock Thomas Partey, not Locatelli, but I mean, to each their own.
Can I just say that, because again, I don't watch a lot of Serie A. I just don't, you know what I mean? So when we're linked with players from that league, I literally have to go and watch compilations to see what they're like. The first 3 minutes of his compilation was of him slide tackling, and usually when you're in the position to have to slide, you're probably already out of position and in a bad way. And he just doesn't strike me as somebody that can cover large patches of grass. He's not going to be able to allow us to push more resources forward. He's just that guy that's I think has a higher ceiling and could be really good, as a Xhaka replacement. But I want to evolve. I'm ready to be a butterfly. We've been a caterpillar for a very, very long time. I'm trying to evolve. I'm trying to get out, So for me, it's a no for me. But Harry, seeing as you like Xhaka and you like what he can bring, do you think Locatelli can do it for us? Do you think he'd be a good partner for Partey? Are you a yes, bring him in for 40 million, or let's go ahead and move in a different direction?
I mean, I think it's about moving in a different direction. I think if you can upgrade a player of Granit Xhaka's profile in terms of the athleticism, the energy, then I think you do it, because I think it will you'll continue to contribute to the attacking play, but he'll give us what Granit Xhaka doesn't sometimes, which is that, that extra bit of dynamism in midfield. But ultimately, what we need to do is move towards a Basuma type, because like George said, we need to change the way we play, change the way we dominate midfield games. And when we're not dominating in the midfield game, then we need to find a way of how we win the ball back. And often that is with a Basuma type of character, and it's not often with a Granit Xhaka type of play. Even though I'm a big fan of Granit Xhaka. So yeah, I mean, it just feels very like for like, similar to how the Neves rumours felt. And you don't feel like it's a massive upgrade. And then you ask yourself, well, why don't you just keep Granit Xhaka? But then it's probably more of a case of, both parties wanting a fresh challenge. So I think it depends on a few things. I think it depends on if there's a number 8 out there that we can buy, an all creative type of player. And if there's not, maybe he just thinks, well, for continuity, maybe Locatelli will be a better signing for me, because it just means I can almost have a like-for-like replacement, and then we can carry on building on this way of football. But I agree with George. I think it's about having energy back again. And I think for me, just the Basuma deal just makes sense. And when you hear the figures, being branded about, you just think, make Basuma happening. So I hope this is all a smoke screen for that. I hope this is using some sort of bargaining, power to try and get that Basuma deal the way we want it. And I hope that's the one that we've got in the pipeline, because that's what I think will give us the change that the fans need. So when we're at the Emirates, we see someone next to Partey, both who are strong, both who can play, both who have the pacing and energy. And I think that will give the whole team a lift. I think it's what we need. I think it's what our defenders need. I think sometimes, when Rob Holding is pushing, I think he'll need someone to get him out of jail. And that doesn't always have to be the centre half. I think it means our fullbacks can bomb forward, knowing that there's someone sitting there with a bit of pace. So, yeah, it feels very much like the Neves signing, which is, could be good, but it's not really what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, really quickly is, I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at the masterclass video. So I don't know if anybody loves that kind of channel on YouTube like I do, but a lot of times, past players and coaches talk about really great performances. And really recently, Freddie Ljungberg was on.
Yeah, I watched that today.
Unbelievable,
yeah.
Right? And the only thing I want to highlight from that area, right? He talked about this square midfield box when we're looking at the Invincibles. And this is my dream. This is what I always tell everybody in terms of how I want to play. You've got 2 huge titans at the back where you're looking at, Kolo Touré and Sol Campbell, right? If we're going back to our roots, our Arsenal roots, okay, not what we did past, 2008, but our invincible roots. When you combine that with a Vieira and a Gilberto Silva, that's a square box that is not getting outrun. And we had our fullbacks that would push up, okay? And this is what I believe we want to step back into. And when you have that square box patrolling the center, there's no way that you're losing the ball. There's no way that you're getting outrun ever. And I believe that, you can have your technique higher up the pitch. You don't rely now on covering for a Granit Xhaka in case they're isolated. You don't have to worry about, oh my God, what am I going to do on the halfway line? Which, by the way, that's what we're moving towards, right? We want to become a dominant team again. We want to camp out on the halfway line. But, well, how do you do that? You do that by having athletes behind you, by being secure. And so when you look at those profiles, I believe in Vieira, we have our Thomas Partey. He needs his Gilberto Silva. When you have Gabriel and Saliba, you got your twin towers at the back there who can run and carry huge distance. Let's just complete the quartet there, and it just makes too much sense. I'm tired of really making excuses for players that are good players, right? Like, it's not that Locatelli's bad. He's a good player. It's just there's a ceiling to what we can achieve with that type of player. So let's move on from it, basically.
I love that. So you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep moving. We're going to get to my favorite part of the show. This is the part where I'm going to talk the most. Sorry, you guys, but
transplants?
Not transplants, not transplants. That's Harry. That's all Harry there. But I want to talk about Tyler Adams for a second. This link, I need this. I need this to happen. You guys, the more I think about it, the more I want it to happen. I really, really do. And I have good reasons for wanting it to happen, right? So he's been linked. We're said to be either in serious negotiations or we're in a position we're ready to pay the release clause. And for me, Tyler Adams could be either the maybe I think he would be the backup player, like not necessarily the starter all the time, but he can play CDM and right back. So what that leads me to believe is maybe we wouldn't be getting Lokanga, maybe we'd be getting him. He can play right back, type of thing for a little bit, and then also fill in at midfield. I'm not quite sure how that works, but ultimately he would fix a couple of issues that we have within our team. And so what I kind of think about is how we're kind of seeing a trend with the Arsenal players that are being linked to us, like the Arsenal players, the transfers or potential transfers that are being linked to Arsenal, which is they can play multiple positions, and it's not they can do a job, it's they can actually play those positions. And having players like Adams or like a Ben White, who we'll get onto in a minute, in your back line that can almost play like midfielders gives you that ability to be really flexible. And what we're seeing is a trend going towards players being almost like positionless. They just occupy certain areas of the pitch. And so that gives you that flexibility. And you even see that with somebody like Zinchenko, who's a center midfielder by trade, but plays left back for Manchester City so that they can dominate possession. And that just seems so Arteta-like, because what we do know about Arteta is that he's very flexible within his system. We've always, under Arteta, been able to play back 3/back 4. And so I feel like that theme will carry on with the players that we bring in. Adams would be perfect to play that pseudo kind of like right back inverted person that also kind of plays center midfield. He's excellent in the tackle, and he's one of those types. It would be one of those type of deals where I know a lot of people would look at it like, okay, 20 million for a player like this with an injury record, which we'll talk about in just a second. But if you want to outsmart the market, a lot of times the players that you get are not sure things. You have to make sure that there's enough things in that deal where there's huge upside, and then you just hope it goes right. And for me, 20 million for a player like this that can play right back and central midfield and will surely be worth a lot in the future if we can get him playing at the right level, to me, like, makes total sense. So he does have an injury record and has multiple muscle tissue injuries, which is not great. But if you have a medical team that knows what they're doing, it shouldn't be an issue if you're not going to overplay them. So what do you guys think about it? I know that I want to just set the stage and set the narrative that, yes, Jessica wants Tyler Adams at Arsenal. But George, I'll go to you first. Being fellow North American individual, what do you think about Tyler Adams and his maybe coming to Arsenal?
I like him. I do like Tyler Adams. He's, I do think he's more of a midfielder than a right back, but he's definitely versatile. So when you're looking at what kind of person he is, it just screams Ainsley Maitland-Niles. And when you're looking at really replacing it, maybe like for like in the squad, I see it. Personally, the only reason I'm kind of against the deal is I want something different at right back. And I think we have great midfield options right now in Thomas Partey. So in terms of getting a game, I struggle. So if it's a question of, is he a starter, George? I don't know. If he's squad depth, then yeah, sure, why not? Again, if we have that bigger pot, I'm not saying no to that kind of player. In terms of the injury history, I will say from a physio perspective, what really worries me is it's in the same area of the pitch. So he's got really these adductor problems. And what it is you have repetitive injuries in an 18-month period in the same area. That's worrisome from kind of a medical perspective. Again, look, we have great medical staff. I think arguably some of the best in the league. We've proven that with our history. So if they're comfortable with it, I am. I don't like those conspiracy theories about injury-prone players. But purely from the profile of a player, he's a great kind of versatile option that you want in the squad. It's just, I don't know, between Chambers and Ainsley Maitland-Niles, are we replacing really much of what we don't have already? Now, I understand Ainsley doesn't have maybe the mentality that we would wish for, and there's some question marks there. But in terms of looking at it as an option, you got to look at it as like a versatile squad depth option, which is great. So if you're replacing somebody who doesn't want to be here that has those same qualities, then, oh yeah, I'm 100% for it. But if you're telling me, George, no, he's going to be a starter and he's going to be kind of the inverted right back, that's when I start to pull away. But from a squad depth option, why not? You know, he's a great stand-up tackler, a shuttler, and he's really good on the ball. Like, I don't think people understand how great he is. So he's snappy off it, but on the ball, he's got a great passing range and he's got a really good vision. So yeah, I do see him more as a midfielder though. And he can play right back. It's just, he's more comfortable, I would say, in midfield, or has had his best performances in midfield.
Well, think about that from this perspective as well, that we're looking for a right back and we need 2 central midfielders. We know that, you know, so
Exactly.
if he comes in as that second central midfielder that would fill in when Partey and Bissouma are not there, then we're talking about a really, really smart deal. I'm talking like that's a high level rotational option. And I think as Arsenal fans, even without Europe, there needs to be an environment of a competitive nature at Arsenal Football Club. Like, it can't just be, well, Thomas and Bissouma start all the time. Like, Adams would definitely be pushing for that spot and he would make it interesting. Whereas when you have somebody that's like so far down the pecking order kind of person, you don't have competition the way that you need it, you know? So not only could he be the backup or the rotational option in midfield, a high level option at that, he can also play right back, which is something that Lukanga doesn't have, you know? So there's that. Harry, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's good to have that competition in the team. I think it's something that we've lacked. I'm pretty sure Partey and Xhaka know that when they're fit, they're always starting. And if you look at someone like Nketiah, you know, not good enough to push Aubameyang or Lacazette, so he became a little bit demotivated. And, you know, Lacazette and Aubameyang at times became complacent. So I think it's about setting the bar. I've only seen, you know, the YouTube videos, which I watched today. So he looks like he's got nice fluidity to his movement, almost like a nice bounce in his run and dribbling.
You mean you're not watching the US men play every time that they come on, Harry?
I'm sorry. I'm either working or sleeping. I'm sorry. When I move to California, I'll make sure I watch it. But yeah, I think it'll be a good signing. Like you say, it's very much a potential replacement for a Maitland-Niles. But once again, I think it just becomes about, you know, what's priority to us and what's priority to the manager. Maybe he has other ideas in his head. Maybe he thinks Chambers can be a starting right back. Maybe he thinks that we only need 1 central midfielder. Maybe Granit Xhaka is going to stay. I heard that there's talks of the move stalling today. So I think it's based on lots of assumptions. But I totally agree that we need to be competitive in the team again. We need players with the right attitude as well, who don't mind sitting out and who are hungry enough to keep on fighting. And sometimes you didn't get that vibe from Reece Nelson or Nketiah or Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and I don't want to accuse them of that, but the vibe that you get is that they weren't hungry or chomping at the bit to play, or were a little bit, you know, kind of disgruntled at not being in the squad. And we need players who are hungry, who don't mind sitting out, but who will keep on working hard. So for me, once again, attitude is really important. So I hope he ticks those boxes as well.
You guys, we have a super chat here from Jordan Shippers. Thank you so much. And he says, big up, Jess. Big up to you as well. You have a look at Isaac tonight. Yes, I did. You guys know I don't think that striker is a big position. Like, it's not a big priority for me, you know, but for the club, it may be because if Lacazette and Nketiah don't stay, then maybe they don't trust Balogun and Martinelli enough to move us forward or whatever. But let me just say this now. I think he's the type of player that I would want to replace Aubameyang, like, you know, eventually. Like, I think he can be that guy. So I like him, whether it's this summer or the next. Like, I would hope that he's on the transfer list. And yeah, the next time that we do a transfer show, we'll do a little bit of a longer talk about him. But I did see him and I did like him, you know. Did you want to give a quick thought on that, George? Or
Yeah, it's just he's not my type of striker. I'm not really amenable to this complete 9 type. I really prefer free movers that are off the back of a shoulder type striker. But if you're looking for that type, he's the best on the market as a prospect. That's something I will say. So just devil's advocate, you know, he's immense. He's got everything. He's got 17 league goals right now. So, you know, he's on the precipice of really an explosion. And if you're looking at something for, him adding to the team, you know, he'd be great. I just don't think that's a move that we do until Aubameyang is gone.
This is just okay. So we've come to we've come to the part of the show where I'm going to allow Harry to convince me that Ben White is good enough to play for Arsenal and we should be going after him. And this link makes sense at 40 to 50 million and all those good things. So, Harry, go ahead.
Hey, no, I imply that the link makes sense if we've got a really, really big pot and there's going to be movement, within our centre halves. I think that sometimes it's just about getting there early, and I think Ben White has kind of went under the radar a little bit, which I think could suit us. I know he's got called up to the Euros, which I think probably tells you a lot about his character, a lot about his personality, because. Let's be honest, it's very unlikely he's going to kick a minute of football out there unless England get knocked out in the group stages and he plays the last game or whatnot. So I just think it could be a good signing for us. And I agree, it's not an area it's an area that we only need to strengthen if it's like a top class centre half. That's how I feel. But in the same respect, if someone like Rob Holding does move on, if Arteta for some reason doubts that Saliba, can make it at Arsenal, then maybe Ben White would be a sensible signing. I'm not saying that Rob Holding should be sold, and I'm not saying that Saliba shouldn't be given a chance, but I'm just trying to look at all of the possible scenarios as to why we would go for Ben White. And then I also think Ben White is a really, really good player. And I know I say that about a lot of players because I like loads of players, but I think he's got a lot of quality. And I think sometimes it's good to have, English centre halves who sometimes have that attitude and that understanding of the league. And I'm not taking away anything from our other centre halves. And once again, I'm not ruling out Saliba, but just on Saliba, maybe there's an attitude thing in there that Arteta just doesn't like. Maybe he just thinks, are you hungry enough to play for Arsenal? Are you humble enough to play for Arsenal? Maybe he just wants to send Saliba out on loan again. Maybe he's considering a loan move to a Premier League club where he can continue to learn his trade and understand the league. Maybe the environment that we provide isn't always good for a player coming from overseas who's so young and who's been through so much personal grief. So I don't know. I'm just trying to, back Arteta as I can by mentioning every possible scenario as to why we would sign Ben White. But you don't like him, do you, Jess? You're not a big fan.
I'm really trying to make it make sense. Look,
yeah, that was a long pause.
One thing I can say is that I think my uncertainty around Ben White is more about my uncertainty about how Arteta feels about Saliba more than Ben White himself.
So
that's more what it is.
This is not Ben White. Ben White's just that guy. He could be anyone.
He could kind of be anybody. It could be anybody. I also don't think he's like as good as people make it. First of all, I don't want my center backs to be 6 foot. I'm over the Mustafi thing. I'm good. I want the 6'4" type of guy, but that's just me. But am I talking about who I want to date, or am I talking about?
Yeah, you're ageist, and you're heightist.
I've heard this before. This seems like a list.
Yeah, I know. This is as a very small old man. This is really hurting. This is bringing back some bad memories. Some real bad memories.
Look, I think center back should be a little bit taller than that. That's just me. And when I watched him play, I think he's really good on the ball. I like that he can play multiple positions, but again, my uncertainty really is just about do you like Saliba? Because if you tell me that our center backs are Marie, Gabriel, Saliba, and Ben White, then I'm like, sign me up for that. But if you're telling me that we're going to send Saliba to Siberia, and then we're going to have Rob Holding and Ben White, then I'm looking at you like, what's happening here? You know what I mean? So I think that's
doesn't that tell you something, though? Doesn't that tell you something? Doesn't that tell us that perhaps there's not as much that we know about the personalities of these players? And we speak about Rob Holding, who's clearly not the best centre-half in the world, but who's clearly got a really great attitude, who's clearly liked by his teammates, who's clearly a really good communicator and a good leader. People might not see that because they don't want to, but ultimately he is, because that's been said by, Chris Wheatley, who get to see these players up close training. They get to see how they communicate and how they act around the players. And maybe it's telling us a lot about Saliba, that maybe he's obviously got a great ability, but maybe his attitude isn't potentially right. Maybe he's not the right the right person that Arteta wants at the club when you're trying to build something, when you're trying to be humble again, when you're trying to, almost hit the refresh button. Maybe Saliba isn't that guy. I'm just thinking of all the possible scenarios. And when you think about the way Saliba has, and obviously he's been through a hell of a lot, so I'm not going to be harsh on him, but when you think about the interviews that he gave, when you think about even the arrival video that he gave, which is obviously a wonderful video, but as a new manager who's probably trying to, get these players to be hungry again, maybe all of these signs aren't what Arteta, like. So there could be that where it's just a case that we just have to wait a little bit longer with Saliba and let him, I don't know, just carry on developing in an environment that's suited to him. I don't know. I'm just trying to, play devil's advocate.
You know what? I think this deal is emblematic of a lot of players that we've talked about. Good players, okay? But squad depth options, ideally, not quite being the fit. And so when I try to untangle this transfer web, what I'm seeing right now are a lot of very odd things, but things that we can take away. So I think what the Ben White story is, I don't necessarily think that's a commentary on us needing a center back. What I read that as is a leak that we can spend that kind of money on a player, that we can spend that kind of 40 million purchase indirectly on a player like that. I think you can make examples of how most of these players, whether it's Tyler Adams, whether it's, Ben White, how they make sense. Rodrigo de Paul, they could make sense in this area. They could make sense if you did this X, Y, and Z. But fundamentally, it's, I think, us being stupid if we were to do it in terms of blocking a pathway of a youngster that we've really put a lot of investment into. And, if we look at the ages 20 and 23, that's not enough of a gap for me to understand backup rotation. That's not enough from both Ben White's perspective. If I'm looking at Ben White and I'm here going to Arsenal, I'm signing for 40 million to be a starter, not a backup. So when you do look at the differences between the two, you have to maybe take that into consideration. And we have somebody in Mavropanos. So if you are looking at in that age range, who has played well in a top 5 league, we have him. So I struggle to understand some of the devil's advocate debates that I have in my head for it. How I read it fundamentally is just, look, these are players that we're being linked to right now in terms of maybe not quite being the standard that we want. And that's the anxiety that maybe is creeping in right now. And when we do make it, not excuses, it's the wrong word, but making scenarios why it would make sense, I could probably do that for most links, in terms of its Buendia or whatnot. But I think fundamentally, if I'm really being critical here, it's just not a move of us being smart. If I'm sitting here claiming we've got to be smart in the transfer window, I don't think spending 40 million on Ben White when we have needs at right back, midfield, and attacking midfield is the smart thing to sign off your summer on. It sets a poor precedent for the window as well. I get we may have money, but if you're sitting there spending 40 million pounds on Ben White, you best believe Basuma is going to be asked for much more. You best believe your Houssam Aouars and everyone looking around says, oh, Arsenal have money. They've got 5 center backs and they're spending 40 million on another one. I don't think it sends a great message both globally and in terms of the club. So I see a situation where it works. Let's say you get rid of Rob Holding. I see it. I see that devil's advocate. But fundamentally, I say, yeah, that this could be us being stupid again. It's not that he's bad, but it's just us not allocating funds well.
George,
sorry.
I just want to say really quick, can you just answer the question from Olivier about Saliba's weakness?
Yeah, really quickly. He has trouble judging crosses, I think, aerially at times. So when he is defending crosses out wide, it's not a matter that he's poor aerially. He's quite dominant aerially when facing it. It's just when he's facing crosses in the box, he misjudges them at times. So he can jump out and leave it at times. But then I struggle because Todibo, his partner kind of at Nice right now, is really leaving him out to dry on quite a lot of these things. So when I look at it, I don't see it as a glaring repetitive weakness. It's something he can work on, judging crosses aerially. That's certainly a criticism that, you can levy at him. But again, it's weird because I can make a con for really any player. I'm kind of looking at it in terms of where we want to go, replacing Luiz, the style of play. There is no better than William Saliba really on the market in progression right now. If I was taking out the names here and just comparing Ben White and looking at their numbers here, the profiles just don't make sense. So for me, yeah, it's a tough one, but that would be a weakness of Saliba's.
Harry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, maybe it's a case of, I know someone like Ben White isn't that signing where we think that's a definitive upgrade, or that's someone that's really going to, take us to the next level. But maybe that's just a reflection of where we are, and it's more of a case of us trying to perhaps get there early. I'm sure if we signed Harry Maguire when he was at Hull, we would have been like, why the hell would we go for this player? But we see, he goes to Leicester in a smaller arena, impresses, then gets his big move to Man United. And if we look at someone like Soyuncu at Leicester, I think someone who we were linked with before, he took a while to find his feet, to find his groove at Leicester. And now we'd all agree that he's a really, top centre half. So sometimes you don't always see it at the start, and then sometimes it is just about taking that gamble. And whilst Rob Holding isn't an amazing player, we signed a 2 million centre half from Bolton, and he's probably worth around 15, 20, 25 million. So I think maybe they just see something in Ben White that they think, if we get there early, this could be someone who's worth a lot in the future. And I think it just kind of, if you look at all of the players we're talking about in general, none of these players are marquee signings, as it were. And unfortunately, maybe that's where the realism hits. And these are the sort of, realistic signings that we can, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever side of the fence you sit on, that these are the signings that we're going to be going for this summer.
I mean, I've already told you guys, it's just about making sure Saliba is at Arsenal Football Club next season. Like, if Ben White is there, Ben White's there. If you want to spend 40 million, but we still are able to get the Basumas and all that kind of stuff done, and that's on the club, and there's a scenario with Ben White where, for me, English center backs, it does not matter how good they are. Like, if they have a couple good games, that their value skyrockets, so we could be in a position where you buy them for 40 and you sell them to Manchester City in a couple of years for 80. You never really know, or Manchester United or whoever, because who would have thought Harry Maguire would have gotten a move to Manchester United for what he did? So it doesn't really strike me as super smart, because for me, when I look at it, it's like, if you wanted to do that and like flip a player like that, you ideally want to get him for less, unless you could sell Holding and sell him for, like you said, 15 to 20 million. And then boom, the price is half. And then you just sell Ben White later on down the road because somebody will pay for him for whatever amount. I like that he can play right back. That's another plus for me, that he can play in a position that we need some different qualities. And I think this is a really good point by Usopp, who sent in a really nice super chat. Thank you so much for that. Usopp says Saliba has been playing predominantly on the left in a back four and back three. Maybe Arteta and or Saliba see himself playing there. There's a good opportunity as well that we're looking at, maybe a future that doesn't include Gabriel as a starter too. It's not a foregone conclusion that we'll always play left-footed and right-footed center backs. You can easily play two right-footers. Saliba has played primarily on the left. Maybe Ben White would play on the right. So it's so inconclusive to me. Y'all want to add anything? Or
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know, because I see this comment a lot, and I think like you have to look at Nice, right? Like when you look at, so what happened here? Like let's analyze, right? Because Nice had a really poor defense, and Saliba was primarily the middle of a back three, and in January they were able to buy Todibo, and between the two, it's a matter of the coach trusting who he can deal with the poor angles on the right. Like when you look at a right center back and you look at someone that's right-footed, placing him on the left is not ideal. It limits his angles. It's really quite difficult. And so when you look at putting somebody there, it actually says that the coach trusts them and their defensive ability quite a bit more, playing on opposite angles, and it opens up a lot of stuff there. In terms of Gabriel maybe not doing it, I don't think that's our direction, given that we've spent so much on Marie and Gabriel. Like if that was the case where we weren't really worrying about it, why spend money on Marie and making sure to have that left-footed center back option there? It would give me confusing messages. And fundamentally, if we do it, and I want to be kind of fair because I've been so optimistic on the window, but if we did do this Ben White, alarm bells would go off in my head about us being dumb again. They really would. And I would have to question it because, again, I can sit here and think up scenarios, but I fundamentally feel that we're being dumb if we complete something like this.
Maybe Arteta's doing a pep and just signing like as many defenders as possible just for fun. Maybe it's one
Who
of those
knows?
ones.
Maybe he's got something from the Man City coffers. They've struck a deal behind.
Maybe Ben White's part of a Basuma deal. Maybe it's part of a bigger picture of buttering, Brighton up, and so there's all these possible scenarios. Who knows? Just Saliba could be starting next season with no Ben White, no Rob Holding, no Gabriel, just Saliba. You never know.
I just am still going to stand firm on Holding and Saliba next season, right-sided center back. Suck it up. I just cannot see us doing it. I can't see us doing it. Like, I don't know why. I just can't. But before we get out of here, I just want to touch on one last rumor about Joaquin Correa, like a player I never really heard of. But then when I looked him up, I like him a lot. I like him a lot. I do. I did. I liked him. I didn't think I was going to. I looked at the initial profile and I was like, 26 years old. Psh, no. Then I thought 6'2", goal scorer, also good in creative play. Reminds me a lot of Kai Havertz. And I do like Kai Havertz, that he can play false nine. He can play a bunch of different positions. Why are we looking in Serie A all of a sudden? This is crazy. I'm not used to this, but what do you think, George, about this player? Have you ever watched him play? What do you think about him? Is he somebody that you would like to see come in as like an additional attacking force, somebody who can do something different?
Yeah, he's good. I have seen him play. The thing, he's best as one of a two. And he does his best work off of somebody else. He primarily goes on the right, and he is much more of a wing forward type. He can drop in and deep, but when you really look at him, he runs in straight lines. He's not necessarily somebody that's like a world-class technician in tight spaces in terms of going into the midfield. But on Correa, I think he's a great versatile option. I think I'm going to go back to this, in terms of squad depth. I think, he would be excellent in the Welbeck form. So how we used Welbeck in theory, where he offered a really great option off the bench to kind of change the game. But then again, I go, don't we have that in Gabriel Martinelli? If we're thinking that, Aubameyang's going to be our starting striker, which, he is. I know everyone doesn't like his output this past season, but he is going to be our starting striker. And I think we have something like that already in profile. I'm not looking at that as a gap. But again, it's like if we have more money and we buy him, I'm not going to say no. It's just another example of us not being smart, in my opinion, in terms of addressing a gap. I feel that we really should be going for something else in midfield, and let's save these squad depth options till later. I've always said this summer is changing the starting 11. Squad depth will happen the next summer. So I'm not considering doing both in one summer. And I don't think we have, even if we had massive amounts to spend, you can't do both. So I would rather us be very calculated and clinical in what we're doing. So I don't know if I see that.
Can I be honest, though? I think that, like, obviously, if we were running the club, we would be looking at these younger players and allowing our players to develop and all these types of things. Like, honestly, if we were running the club, it'd probably be popping. Like, let's just be real. But for some reason, I just think that looking at Arteta's pattern, I don't think that I think he got to the point where he was like, I need to use these young players. Look at how long it took him to get there. Like, it took him very long to get to the point of playing the young players. And then, Smith Rowe was available. He started playing him, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, he's always leaned on experience. Like, that's what I know of Arteta. That is how he is. Always lean on experience. When he had the chance to play whatever young player, he would play Mustafi instead. Like, that's just who he is. So for me to look at the average age of our club or our team at this point, which you've said is like 24, and then to see like the lack of leadership and experience that would be a part of that team, especially in midfield and maybe some of the attacking positions out wide, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw 26-year-olds and stuff like that coming in, because I'm not convinced that Arteta is like us and says 24 to 25. I can see some of these types of players coming in just for that simple fact that he wants more established players, like, Correa, and even like that Guido Rodriguez guy. All these guys are like 26, 27 years old playing for the Argentinian national team. Like, am I wild to think that might be the vision of Edu and Arteta? Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? These links are not the links that I had in my head. Rodrigo de Paul. It's just not similar to like what I was thinking in my head, like the Awaz that we would be linked with, I thought, But Harry, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that we think, do you think that we know what we're trying to do? Are we trying to force our own opinions on it? Is there a pattern, or is there like a chance that we could look up and see a team that doesn't look anything like what we've been envisioning this entire time? Because those links are not similar. They're not. They're different. They're older players, established players, you know, they're older and established.
Yeah, I think it's hard because we don't know how factual some of these rumors are. But like I've said, I feel like we're missing experience. And I'd be happy if that's something that Arteta and Edu look to pursue. But in the same token, I'm sure if a Martinelli came along, I don't think they'd hesitate in trying to, sign someone of that quality, of that age, from whatever league, no matter how raw they are. But when George just mentioned, Danny Welbeck before, it gave me good memories. And whilst he was part of a squad that didn't really, achieve what we should have achieved, sometimes it's good to have those players waiting in the wings, who essentially have experience and who have games under their belt and have experience, whether it's promotions or winning, domestic cups. I think it's just it's a good way of building a hungry squad. And I don't think we can have too many young kids in there, because yes, with a young team, you'll have this fearlessness and this, this courage and this unpredictability about you. But I think we've seen this season that we struggle to motivate ourselves against the smaller clubs, those games at home that we should win, we just don't. And I think a bit more experience might help us step over the line. But you're right, in terms of like the names we're thinking of or the names we're imagining, these are total
it's not matching
in that
up.
respect. Yeah, well, it just shows you we're in the wrong business. Maybe we should predict something else. Maybe we're just focused on hair transplants. I think that's the way forward. That's the way forward.
Really quick, I just want to read this. The super chat from Usopp. It's on the same kind of subject wavelength. Thank you so much for your super chat. But Usopp says, our squad is too young. Can't be depending on kids like Gabby, Arsaka, etc. to save us. We need some experience to come in. Not going to get top 6 with kids. And I'm just thinking about that. Like, maybe this project is shorter than we think. I'm thinking 2 to 3 year rebuild. What if they're thinking, get these experienced players in, try to push for top 4, just like that. I mean, Arteta was the one who said Champions League in 3 seasons, and he was not even thinking of a situation outside of Europe for next season. Maybe they're not planning on this slower rebuild that maybe we're envisioning, you know what I mean? Because when you're looking at players at 26, 27 years old, you're saying tomorrow we want to be in top 4. You can't have them for a longer rebuild. It doesn't work.
Don't you think that's part of the problem, though, Jess? Since 2018, since we look at the Sven Mislintat windows, since we look at what has got us out of Europe, but also not being able to get back into Europe, I would argue the bright spots of all our campaigns in that year has been younger players. It hasn't been the experienced players. And I don't buy necessarily that experience buys you credibility in terms of performance. I think performance buys you performance in a sense. And it's that when you look at it, it's really about looking at the profiles of a team and making sure that they make sense. Because really, if I look at Correa as well, like, we have experience in the striker department. So like when you analyze the young part of the age, it's not like we're young in the striker department. We're old in the striker department. So some of these things, this is why I don't think like they make sense. So when I'm looking at debunking rumors, yes, you're right, experience plays a role. But if I look at our age profile in the striker department, not overall now, but like looking at the strikers, we've got Lacazette, Aubameyang, Martinelli. We've got great progression there, but we're also old. So if you're telling me Lacazette out, Correa in, okay, cool. Maybe I could get in line with that. But again, it comes down to us really understanding where we need to go. And I don't think that experience or those tropes of inexperience can really be levied at the whole. You really have to look at probably what's best for what the squad needs right now. And I think that's profiles in terms of midfield. And that's why I talk about understanding this web of transfers. I really think a lot of these are smoke screens. We've signed almost 20 players. I made a list yesterday of all the linked players that we have done. It's reached 20 in terms of links.
Nice.
And so that's great. We're signing players. But again, it just seems to me that right now we don't do our business like that anymore. I do think it's worth pointing out. So in terms of trying to project, it makes it difficult to follow links and maybe think, okay, that's the profile that we're signing for sure in terms of the team. And yeah, it just becomes really what you want. I'm more of a young person kind of rebuild. I am admitted into that, but maybe Arteta does like more experienced players. It is at odds with what we have in that department. That's one thing that I would maybe look at and see. It doesn't line up to me because in that specific position, we're old, not necessarily young.
I think it's about having the right experience, isn't it? I just think it's about, if their experience, like David Luiz, it's about having someone with the right attitude, not a Willian. I think when we look at the Minstadt signings in terms of Socrates and Mustafi and even Czech to a certain extent, they were either over the hill or essentially they just weren't good enough. So I think it's about getting the right players, 26, 27, 28, if that's the age, or younger. But George makes a good point. We are old in some areas, or actually young, but yeah, we are still old in some areas. But I still think we need some proven winners who have been there and done that, because I just think it will help our younger players progress, especially if they come with some sort of, pedigree of winning trophies. I think, that will help the likes of Emil Smith-Rowe and Saka. But when we talk about young players, let's not forget that these aren't just young players. These are special young players. Saka is incredibly special. Emil Smith-Rowe is someone that we'll be talking about, in the England team potentially within the next couple of seasons. Same with Martinelli. These aren't your everyday young fringe players. These are special kids. So if you put experience in and around that at whatever position, I feel like it can help us progress even further. But who knows?
That's really what it is. Who knows? I mean, we could be, hopefully at the end of the window talking and being like, yay, Basuma. Like, who knows? Like, that's what I'm hoping for, though.
That's the name of your new show, Who Knows Arsenal? But who knows
Arsenal? Exactly. Nobody even knows, but still holding out hope that we're going to do the right things. And ultimately, Arteta needs to get the right people for his system, and we need to see what Arteta ball really looks like with his players. So hopefully he gets that. But that's going to be it for the show today, you guys. But before you guys go, I want to let you know what's kind of coming up in the next couple of days. You guys asked for it. I'm doing it. Watch-alongs will start tomorrow for the France versus Germany game. So be on the lookout for that. That'll start at 12, but my preview would actually start at 11. So make sure you're here. You asked for it, so you better be there watching me. I mean, the thing is it's not Arsenal, so you won't see the real meltdowns until next season, but you can just get a little preview of it. So 11 a.m. tomorrow, or not 11, 9 p.m. Is it 9 p.m.? 9 p.m. 7 p.m. UK time, right? You guys help me. 7 p.m. UK time. No, I got it. 7 p.m. UK time, match preview. 8 p.m. the game starts, and then I'll be doing my watch along. And then on Wednesday, Elliot Smith will be on the show at 7 p.m. UK time. So just be here. Just be here. Subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff so you get reminders. And you guys make sure that you follow George and Harry on Twitter at It's DJ Harry and at GeorgeV_AFC. And we'll be back soon with more transfer talk and all that kind of stuff. I hope you guys like the new branding and all that kind of stuff. I worked hard on it. In a past life, I was a graphic designer / web designer. So hopefully it's looking good around here. And yeah, leave a comment if you guys feel like it. And, I'll get to it and we can have discussion there as well. So I'll see you guys later. Bye, guys.